And from the beautiful Drafts Cafe in Haggerston to our drafty little studio here in Westminster, George Galloway joins us now. Welcome back to the programme, George.
Thank you.
If Mr Corbyn took a clear-cut, almost hard Brexit line, could he carry his party?
No, I mean, people like Liz and many, many others, more than 4%, maybe 74%, would be hostile to that. That's why I think he's been carefully playing this. And he ought to continue that, because that doesn't then burst open the Labour Party's divisions. And as I said, quoting Napoleon, never interrupt your enemy while he's busy making a mistake.
When they're displaying their divisions
Indeed,
on the Tory side.
indeed.
There's John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor. He says Labour policy on Brexit is evolving. Do you think it's evolving in a softer direction, more in your direction?
Yes, I do. And I think you will see more next week, particularly around the customs union, and I hope it goes further still around the single market. I think the reason why is that the leadership is listening not just to party members, Labour voters and the trade unions, but understanding that I'm afraid a hard Brexit would simply finish the job that Thatcher begun on our manufacturing industries in the Midlands and the North, and undermine workers' rights and environmental standards, all of which are very important for the future of our economy, and the very strong argument that you cannot be an anti-austerity party if you're out of the single market and the customs union and our economy takes a hit.
George.
Well, if we go into the next election and the dichotomy is we're the Tories that withdrew from the European Union and they're Labour that tried to betray it, that's a disaster for Labour. 70% of Labour-held constituencies voted leave in the referendum. And if Labour can be fixed as the stab-in-the-back party, the party that betrayed the decision the British people made in the referendum, that'll be an electoral catastrophe. There'll be parts of London where it will be of benefit, but in the north, in the post-industrial wastelands of the Thatcher era, it'll be a complete catastrophe.
What do you make of this, Michael?
Well, I think George is absolutely right that Labour should not be interrupting their enemies while they're making mistakes. A couple of weeks ago on this programme, I said that I thought Corbyn would not want to be Prime Minister at this moment. I was howled down, not least by you. But I think George is kind of saying the same thing. I mean, let the Tories get on and get to Brexit of whatever form, then the Labour Party is not responsible for what has happened. I don't believe there's going to be a hard Brexit, because in the end, I think the European Union and Britain, neither one will want to impose tariffs upon the other. I just don't think it's where the world is headed for. But I certainly think that Labour's best interest, Corbyn's best interest in particular, are to allow the Tories to get on with this for the next 2 years, to be hopelessly divided about it, and to pick up the settled consequences, the outcome.
What about George's wider vision of a Corbyn foreign policy, what it could be like? I mean, what George outlined, by and large, it has the benefit of being what Mr Corbyn believes. It may be right or wrong, but it is what he believes, isn't it?
Well, I don't think that we should be an anti-West, anti-American, anti-Europe isolationist party.
But that's your leader's position.
I don't think that you can build social democracy, let alone socialism, in one country if you don't understand that our economy is global, climate change, terrorism, migration can only be dealt with if you play a strong role in the international rules-based institutions that we set up. And
but
I think
George was arguing for a continued strong role, just a very different role.
And a very special relationship with the United States. I'm the great-grandson of the only woman in the 19th century who emigrated from the United States to Dundee, and you've seen Dundee. There's nothing anti-American about me. I want Corbyn and Sanders to make a really special relationship, one involving people and not just corporations, though of course corporations have their role, and far from isolation.
You also need to get Mr Sanders into the White House too.
The current polls are showing him.
Think he's going to run again?
He's going to run again, if he's still alive, of course. But then that's true of Corbyn and true of all of us.
I thought that this part of George's film should be shown every hour during the coming election campaign as a Conservative Party political broadcast, unveiling what a Corbyn foreign policy would be like, with one footnote, if I may, George, you mentioned BRICS and the R stands for Russia, but you didn't mention whether you wanted to warmly embrace Russia, the murderous regime which is killing off civilians in large numbers in Syria at the moment. And I think this does represent quite a difficulty for you. The regimes that you would like to put your arm around, China you mentioned, with massive numbers of death penalties every year, highest
Falling
number of death
record on
penalties.
human rights.
Even more than the United States.
Still, yes, many more than the United States.
Not many more.
Still displaying the poster of Mao Zedong, who murdered 50 million Chinese in Tiananmen Square.
You've obviously
still
not.
with Mao on the
Okay,
banknotes.
no, let him answer.
You've obviously not been hired yet as a consultant to Chinese business, but for your information, Britain's trying very hard to trade with China, and outside of the European Union will be in a better position to do it. Of course,
But you socialists have more in common with the Chinese and with the Russians.
One has to trade with all kinds of countries, and with the exception of Saudi Arabia, I'd be in favour of trading with them. And to trade with them, you have to have good relations. All the countries, 25 countries we have sanctions against at the moment, 18 of which we have invaded in the past.
Well, since you left,
all I'm asking
since
for,
you left Russia out of your little film, would you like to say what you feel about Russia's role in Syria at the moment?
you know, it's very cold outside tonight, and if it's warm indoors, it's because of Russian gas. Russia is an important trading partner and can be a still more important
We don't take gas directly from Russia.
well, across Europe.
Europe does.
Across Europe.
We may get some
Russia-
indirectly through a pipeline, but we don't take it directly.
So
But let me ask you this:
murderous regimes of gas should be let off, should they?
Let me make this wider point.
Murderous regimes with oil, like Saudi Arabia, you always let off.
It would mean, at least in the short term, particularly if you don't get Mr. Sanders in the White House, which I think is a bit of a stretch, turning our backs on America, on our European allies, embracing perhaps Russia and Iran. Could you really sell that to the country?
Well, I'm asking the country to embrace the world, to leave the European Union's failing economies, with all the stresses and strains in the European Union, it's falling apart in front of our eyes, and embrace instead a world where economies are
But
rising.
the trouble is, George, you sound no different from Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Labour Party members and Labour voters just won't buy that. If what we end up having is exactly the same policy that Jacob Rees-Mogg is suggesting, it's not right for the country, and it's not what party
I
members
didn't
or
know
Labour
that
voters
Comrade
support.
Rees-Mogg had come over to our side of things. If he has, I welcome it. I'd welcome yourself and Michael too.
I didn't know he was in favour of Mr. Sanders.
I'm not sure that he is. But the
who knows?
idea, you know, this is not isolationism. It's leaving the European Union and joining the world. Now, if Rees-Mogg says the same thing, well, even a stop clock is right twice a day, and he's right on that if that's what he's saying.
Let me ask you this, a final question since we've got you. If Mr. Corbyn was to become Prime Minister, how likely do you think is he to go in the direction of foreign policy that you've outlined? Does he have the inclination to be that bold, or is he likely to be much more gradual?
He's not as bold as one would have thought he would be. He's under a lot of pressure inside the Parliamentary Labour Party. He doesn't have 24 people amongst his MPs who actually agree with him historically, or even now, perhaps. The Blairites are still there in huge numbers in the PLP. So he's quite cautious. He's quite serene. Zen-like, you might say. And so I don't think if he became Prime Minister, he'd be knocking over the apple carts, kicking over the money changers' tables and so on. But he'd be a steady, slow but steady progress in the direction that I've been describing.
George Galloway, thank you.
Pleasure.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.